Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another riveting episode of the Gut Wrench podcast. I'm your host, Mocha, and I feel the need to inform everyone that 50% of what you might hear on this episode is going to be a lie, a farce. So, the review itself that we will be looking at is not a farce, is not a lie. It's nothing that I'm going to be lying about. But I had this idea where I would take Impact Wrestling and WWE and compare them side by side. So seeing as though that I'm going to be comparing them side by side, I'm going to need a little bit of a gimmick for this episode, okay? Now, if you stick with me until the end, I'm letting you know right now within the first minute or so that you don't automatically click off and think, what happened to Mocha and his personality. I understand this can be hard to listen to, so I want to say viewer discretion is advised, as in to the viewer's discretion. I might not be acting like myself in this episode. And what I mean by that is that you're going to hear me say something you thought you'd never hear me say. But if you pay attention and wait until the very end of this episode, then you'll understand that it's all going to come full circle. Remember that episode wherever it all came full circle? See, it's like a circle. Can't be a square or a triangle, it's like a circle. For those of you who understood that, I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry reference, then you watch as many Adam Sandler movies as I do. But anyway, had that been the case, we're going to go ahead and look at a direct timeline to timeline comparison. A timeline to timeline comparison of Impact Wrestling facing off against WWE Monday Night Raw. So, I'm going to start with Impact Wrestling because that's where I started this week. But before we begin, keeping in mind that 50% of what you're going to be hearing is going to be nothing but a truth and or not a lie, and or a lie, or not fully the truth, like I just got done saying. It says here in my notes that I have to inform you guys only one time before these next few matches begin. Don't click away whenever I say this. I like KO. Moving on. We're going to go ahead and look at a March 1st, 2016 episode of, hopefully you haven't clicked away if you've stayed this long. Thank you so much. A March 1st, 2016 episode of Impact Wrestling. And see, on Impact Wrestling, what had happened was they showed a recap of what happened at the pay-per-view last week. At the pay-per-view last week, their main event featured one Ethan Carter III, EC3, facing off against... EC3 was accompanied by someone. His name is Spud... Why do I want to say McKenzie? Oh my god, his last name is not McKenzie. Rockstar Spud. So, in case you don't know, A spud is a potato. That's literally what they call potatoes, is spuds. So, is he a rock star potato? I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, I do like KO, so I mean, it's up for interpretation. It's anybody's guess at this point. But I feel that it's important that you know that he was accompanied by the ring by a man named Rockstar Spud, and he would turn his back on EC3. EC3 would promptly try to escape the cage match that he was in. You see, the pay-per-view last week that I was talking about, that they had the week prior to this, March 1st, not March 3rd. March 1st, 2016. Earlier I said March 3rd, and I don't know why. Anyway, the pay-per-view prior to this March 1st, 2016 episode of Impact Wrestling that aired on Spike TV, I think, the pay-per-view prior had a gimmick such as the one that I have right now, but the pay-per-view prior's gimmick was that every match had to be a steel cage match, and they called it Lethal Lockdown, and they did everything in their power to stop themselves from calling it what it truly was, a steel cage match. They stopped calling it steel cage. They called it one of two things: 6 sides of steel, or they called it Full Metal Mayhem, which is also what they would call their ladder matches. They would not call them ladder matches, they would call them Full Metal Mayhem. There's probably a reason for that. Probably for originality purposes. To be like, hey, you guys call yours a cage match, but we call it something else. Anyway, that was a week at the pay-per-view prior. As soon as the program starts, though, after they show all of these highlights, we get to our first wrestling match. That's what I like. Like, show me what happened last week, but don't bog it down. Don't make it all about what happened last week. Don't make it the most important thing, so much so that it overshadows everything else. And anyway, Bobby Roode versus Kurt Angle. Now, if you stuck with me for this long, thank you so much. You're truly a friend, and you're truly supportive. And listen, we're going to get through this together, okay? In a few moments, give or take about 48 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you all what the gimmick of tonight is, okay? Or rather, the morning, because tonight, I mean, you're not listening to this at night. You're more than likely going to be listening to this in the morning, because that's when I upload, thanks to my work schedule. Don't make fun of me. Bobby Roode versus Kurt Angle, which was a wonderful wrestling match as far as wrestling matches go, because Kurt Angle is he is an athlete among athletes, and for one to compare a Kurt Angle match to something, they must have to experience it themselves. And Kurt Angle is honestly, he's up there with the greats. And according to them, Impact Wrestling, he was their first world champion. And this was all a part of a whole Kurt Angle going away tour, retirement tour, if you will. Well, we all know what happened next. He would promptly wait about 7 or 8 months, 9 or 10 or 12 months. Yeah, around 12 months maybe. And he would go to the WWE in December of the following year. So in December of the following year, I've already done that pay-per-view. By the way, you probably seen it. It's called TLC 2017. And he would join the Shield in what I would call one of the worst wrestling matches that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I mean, it had a decent ending, I guess you could say. And whenever I say decent ending, I don't mean that the good guys win and you know, anything like that. I just mean that whenever it was over, I was kind of happy because I didn't have to sit there and watch it anymore, because it drug on and on and on. And you know, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I mean, I don't know if it's a secret or not, but I'm kind of a wrestling mark, if you will. Mark, if you're listening, I'm not talking about you. A mark is a term to describe someone who believes in their own hype in the world of professional wrestling. So if that's the case, and if I'm a wrestling fan, and I'm a fan who believes in their own hype, every time that I'm watching a wrestling match, I get super excited, and I can't stop myself from getting excited. I feel butterflies in my stomach. My mouth gets dry. My heart starts to race faster and faster. It's like meeting a nice woman, you know? It's like having sex for the first time. But anyway, aside from my perverse pleasure in professional wrestling, try saying that 5 times fast, Bobby Roode versus Kurt Angle. And during the commentary, they let us know that Angle is going to be inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame. And I gave this match 4 out of 5 stars. I've honestly never seen Bobby Roode, even though I spelled his name wrong on this piece of paper, and I didn't find that out until they finally fucking showed his nameplate. Whenever the graphic on the screen showed his nameplate for his entrance as they were introducing him. James Storm after the match. So James Storm comes out, and he's Robert Roode, or Bobby Roode's tag team partner, and Storm pulls out a beer for him and Bobby Roode. So he gives Bobby Roode a beer, he gives himself a beer, and they drink some beer, but there's something else in that bag. He goes ahead and he pulls it out, and it's a half a gallon of milk. And he gives it to Kurt Angle, and then he says, chug, 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 chug. If you don't know the significance of Kurt Angle and the milk, well, it's too long a story. It really is. I've been told by other people not to get off subject, too much. But in a nutshell, Kurt Angle drives a milk truck to the arena and down the entrance ramp, and he basically hoses the McMahon regime, Stephanie McMahon, Mr. McMahon, Steve Austin. He hoses everyone down that's in the ring. I could be wrong. It's not the McMahons. Oh man, was it? I'm remembering William Regal for some reason. He's hosing William Regal down in the thing that I'm thinking about. But anyway, he practically comes to the ring with this big milk truck, and he hoses everybody down, almost like he's got a fire hydrant and it's filled with milk at the bottom. Some milk truck, I don't know, man. It's hard to explain. If you were to go on YouTube, pause this, go on YouTube, and then go to their search bar and then type in Kurt Angle milk truck, and I'm almost certain that would be enough to find it. If you were to go on Google, you may be able to find the segment of wrestling there where Kurt Angle hoses somebody down with a milk truck. Austin did, I want to say something similar, but Austin did it first. Austin drove a beer truck down to the ring and he hosed down The Rock and McMahon and everyone else for that matter. And The Rock was very green when this happened because the whole time, and Austin used to work construction, so the whole time that Austin is just preparing the hose to be spraying beer in the ring, The Rock is telling him what he can do with that beer truck. He says, you can take that beer truck down to Jabroni Drive and Know Your Role Boulevard. And before The Rock can say anything else, he gets a mouthful of beer. And The Rock was extremely green back then. But, I mean, what do I know? I like KO. And the next thing we see is celebrates. That's why he brings out the milk jug. The half a gallon of milk jug is wherever he's drinking the milk, and then they're saying chug, 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 chug. First thing he says, okay, so Matt Hardy. After this, they cut to a commercial, or the screen goes dark, and then they say that we'll be right back. As soon as they come back, Matt Hardy's in the ring, and then the first thing he says was, I was in that cage. And he's talking about EC3, of course, what we just got done talking about. He's talking about Ethan Carter. He's talking about how him and Ethan Carter just got done last week with the whole, that whole deal that they just got done with, which was Ethan Carter being the blunt of his attack, and he's so, I don't like Ethan Carter. He's so Ethan Carter-ish. So afterwards, and here's my nitpick from that. The first thing that Matt Hardy says whenever he gets into the ring is, I was in that cage. And yes, they did show highlights, but it would have been a lot better if Matt Hardy would have said something to the effect of, so last week I was in a cage match, and try to catch people up as to what happened last week. Imagine you're turning on the TV, because people are constantly flipping through the channels, and you don't want to hear that. So last week, and that's where you find it, Impact Wrestling. So last week I was in that cage. No. What if someone missed the highlights? What if they're just now coming in from work and then they're like, just turn on wrestling and shut up, Think of the people, Matt Hardy. So it says here in my notes that I got to say it again, so I'm sorry, but it'll all come full circle, guys, I promise you. I like KO. Rockstar Spud changes his motives. My fault. This whole KO thing got me riled up. First claiming to betray EC3 for money, and then afterwards he comes out saying that it was for revenge. So Matt Hardy says he did it for money, and then whenever Rockstar Spud comes out, he says that he did it for revenge. So it kind of doesn't make sense that he doesn't have his motives, promptly so. If someone offers you, let's say, 10 payments of $500,000 on a monthly basis for 9 years to betray your best friend with the contingency that you don't talk to them ever again. And whether that best friend is your wife, whether it's your friendship with someone would have to be extremely priceless not to pass up on the 9 years of $500,000 payments that they're getting. And imagine that they're such a psycho bitch or such a psycho bastard that they actually go over and they talk to the other person on a contingency basis to see if you're actually talking to them. And all they say every time that they see the one fucking person that drives them crazy that they don't want you to talk to is, "Hey, how are you? Did you hear about..." And then just ask if they have had any contact with you so that you know that, since you're the person that's paying them, to stay away from this person. Rather convoluted backstory, I guess. But it's just an example to, I guess, further the motives of Rockstar Spud. I still can't get over that name, Rockstar Spud. Like, are you a rock star or are you a potato? Can you tell me? An unsanctioned match after Spud and Hardy demand EC3 be fired and or thrown in jail. So they're talking to Dixie Carter, which, by the way, shares the last name as Ethan Carter, and don't worry, we'll get to that. They're talking to Dixie Carter about having EC3 thrown out of the building, fired, like, you can't put up with this behavior from EC3. He's an animal. There's nothing that he can, like, he can't treat Matt Hardy like that. It's his birthday. And on top of that, Matt Hardy is your champion. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So she says, "You know what? You two are right. I'm going to have to wipe my hands clean of everything." And then she says, "Tonight's match is going to be an unsanctioned match." Now, if you'll remember, we looked at an unsanctioned match at the pay-per-view of an NXT event, and if I remember correctly, that episode's name is Make It Personal. We looked at that unsanctioned match because that was a really good match. And not only that, but it had great storytelling. It had backwards and forwards. It was consistent. It was off the chain, to quote Bobby Roode's theme song. But anyway, the next match that we get to is, after the unsanctioned meeting that they had, also Dixie Carter and apparently Ethan Carter, whenever EC3 was brought into the company, it was said that EC3 was Dixie Carter's aunt. So I guess that would make Dixie Carter EC3's... Oh, okay. I had that backwards. Okay, shut up. EC3 is Dixie Carter's... If we're talking about EC3, his relationship to her would be nephew. Dixie Carter is his aunt. There we go. I got it right that time. So had that been the case, whenever he first came into the company, and I didn't realize that this was a work and that it wasn't, for real. I thought that it was real, because they were playing it off like it was real. Of course they were. They're wrestling. But they had this whole storyline where EC3 would get opportunity after opportunity after opportunity handed to him because, of course, he would. The new CEO of the company, Dixie Carter, was practically handing him championship opportunities because that's her family. Because why wouldn't she? And then he would finally win, or he would lose, and then whenever he would lose, he would come over, and then he would be like, "Please, Aunt Dixie, please give me another chance." So, they pretty much, for all intensive purposes and consistency reasons, they pretty much just threw that straight out the window. They practically just said, okay, well, and during this segment here, they don't mention anything about Dixie Carter being EC3's aunt. They don't, like, whenever Matt Hardy comes up to her to ask her for, hey, you need to get this man fired. No. Why would you fire your family? It makes no sense. Nonetheless, my notes here tell me that I have to inform you all that I like KO. I mean, the notes don't lie, right? There's nothing that I like more than KO. I wake up in the morning and I breathe KO. Anyway, the next match on the card, don't worry, it'll all make sense by the end of the broadcast, I promise you. In a good 30 minutes, I'm going to reveal what it is that I'm talking about. The next match on the card is Abyss versus Jimmy Havoc. It's a street fight and a no DQ match. May as well just been an unsanctioned match, but this was just bad storytelling. It had something to do with this group that Abyss is a part of, which has these two other people in it, Rosemary and Crazy Steve, all of which wear this face paint, and for whatever reason, Rosemary seems to be infatuated with Jimmy Havoc, Abyss's opponent, and for whatever reason, they have some sort of a past, and Abyss won't let Jimmy Havoc be anywhere near Rosemary. And it's almost like it's just, hurry up, we need a story to tell tonight. That you, over there in the corner, wear this shirt, and your name is now Jimmy Havoc, and you, girl, we need you to be with him for 5 minutes. Okay, talk. And then they just come up with a jumble fuck of context rather, for a relationship that these two had 5 minutes ago. And then they said, all right, you, young girl, we're going to put you in face paint. We're going to rename you Rosemary. I don't care what your name is. You're Rosemary now. And then afterwards, they just went ahead and took another guy and then said, all right, you're Crazy Steve. Nobody knows your backstory, and it don't matter. You're just a background character. Shut up. Put on this face paint. Don't ask questions. And walk around like you're crazy. Because that's what somebody named Steve would do. But anyway, they go ahead and they just have a clusterfuck of a hardcore, no disqualification match. I'm told I'm not supposed to say hardcore because, daddy. Anyway, what we're going to go ahead and do now is, okay, so I put a little note here that says 13 minutes is when we get our first match, and 35 minutes is where we get our second match. So, 13 minutes is where the first match ends, rather, because they automatically, just as soon as the broadcast began, aside from showing us highlights, boom, Kurt Angle, get your ass out there. Bobby Roode, get your ass out there. Like they were on it. These people didn't come to see highlights from last week. They came to see actual professional wrestling. And so they delivered. But anyway, Gail Kim in the ring, she gets a standing ovation and they chant her name over the performance that she put up last week against Dollhouse. Dollhouse is a group made up of 3 women, and I couldn't figure out who the third one was. but they mentioned Jade and Madison Rain, and I don't know if the third one is Velvet Sky or if Velvet Sky was on Gail Kim's in Gail Kim's corner. No one seems to be in Gail Kim's corner because whenever Gail Kim came out and she started challenging Maria, Maria comes out and she just runs her mouth and she says that she's not going to be wrestling tonight, to the chagrin of some of her fans, or for that matter, any of her fans, if she has any. Anyway, after this ends, Gail Kim chases Maria out of the arena, or tries to, whenever Jade ends up coming out of nowhere and beating Gail Kim up. And here on my notes, I'm told that I'm having to say that I like KO. Can't get me enough KO. Anyway, what we're going to go ahead and do now is talk about the King of the Mountain Championship match that happened between Eric Young and Big Debo. Now, I spelled his name wrong because I didn't know whether... Okay, is it spelled D-A-Y-B-O? Dabo? No. Is it spelled D-A-V-E-B-O? Davo? Davebo? Or is it spelled D-A-E-B-O? I didn't put all these spellings, I promise you. But I remember Josh Matthews trying to explain to me that it's Dabo. So I just put D-A-B-O, and I don't know whether that spells Dabo. But I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was a pretty good match. I mean, it was just a big Scottish guy versus like a small maniac in Eric Young. The next match we have is Drew Galloway versus Mike Bennett, which was extremely was honestly impressive. And I'd never seen Drew Galloway before, except in prior wrestling in other wrestling promotions, you know. Drew Galloway at this time, who is now Drew McIntyre, who is a main event talent in WWE, and this was in 2016. He hit Mike Bennett with what I would consider to be one of the worst, jaw-shattering, teeth-cracking Claymore kicks that I have ever seen in my entire life. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The miracle Mike Bennett ends up winning, and the funny part is the fact that Galloway says, they're calling him the captain, by the way, and I'm not sure why. They never in my life have I heard anyone refer to this man as a captain of anything. I mean, I don't know, he doesn't look that much like, you know, Jack Sparrow, but it's all good. Drew Galloway, though, is a big Scottish warrior, and Mike Bennett, it's funny because at the whenever they're doing like the interviews, and Impact Wrestling does like a lot of them, wherever they'll just come into someone's locker room and then they'll be like, so how do you feel about facing your opponent tonight? Before the match begins, or like 20 minutes before the match even starts. And then they'll be like, yeah, I think it's going to be a really good, rough competition. You know, I'm Steven Seagal now, so Chris Tucker's got nothing on me. Anyway, what I mean to say is that Drew Galloway, and Galloway says this thing during one of the interviews, and it's like, he says, the miracle Mike Bennett might think that he has a chance against me, but he's going to need a miracle in order to beat me. And what happens is Mike Bennett ends up beating Drew Galloway because Maria causes a distraction. And Maria calls herself the first lady of professional wrestling. She says she's happy that she's a celebrity because she's been on Playboy. She's been with Dancing with the Stars. She's done everything that there is to do. What does it mean to be the first lady of professional wrestling? I won't even know what it means to be the first man of professional wrestling. Because obviously I wasn't the first man to invent professional wrestling. Shut up. Everybody just shut up. I'm the only one that's talking. Well, just shut up. And then we go to the no-holds-barred street fight, or the unsanctioned match between Rockstar Spud and EC3. I never heard a bell ring. Now, I could be wrong, but EC3 just goes directly for Rockstar Spud. And since I never heard the bell ring, and like I said, I could be wrong. Maybe the bell did ring. Maybe I just didn't hear it. Rockstar Spud versus EC3 never got a rating. So their main event for this right here, like I said, I'm trying to pit WWE against Impact Wrestling. And this never got a reading. It never got a rating. Holy crap, did I just say reading? Like I said, 50% of what you hear here. Holy crap, I'm messing up. Even whenever I'm not trying to. Everything that you hear on this episode here is or is not true. So, 50% of it may be true and 50% of it may not be true. And I didn't want to cuck you guys and say 49% of it will be true and 51% of it will not be true. So it's up to you to decide what's true and what's not. No, I didn't want to cuck you guys and do that. So I figured I'd put it right down the middle. 50%, 50%. True, not true. Also, it tells me on my notes here that I have to say very loud for the microphone so that everyone can hear it. I like KO. Now, that's the last time that I'm told that I'm supposed to say it here before the big reveal. Okay? So if you stuck with me for this long, that's the last time that you have to hear it. Well, you remember Mike Bennett, right? That we just got done talking about? Only fools believe in miracles. So if you don't know who I'm talking about, the fact is that Mike Bennett, his literal wrestling gimmick is I am the miracle Mike Bennett. I'm not really sure why, though. And most of the time, whenever he's wrestling or whenever he has a match, everyone always uses the same line whenever they're facing him or about to face him. He's going to need a miracle to get out of the ring with me. Every time, it never fails. They call Rockstar Spud the ultimate underdog. They call Sami Zayn the ultimate underdog. So I already don't like Rockstar Spud. So whenever he comes out from now on, now that I can't tell whether he's a rock star, a potato, or whether or not he's a combination of the two. I mean, is he trying to be like Mr. Potato Head? Anyway, Monday Night Raw from the same timeline. And this episode is from March 7th, 2016. Get out here. What the hell are you doing? March 7th, 2016. And Mr. McMahon comes out. Actually, Shane McMahon comes out. Where the hell did she go? Shane McMahon comes out and he says, whenever Shane McMahon comes out, the commentators put McMahon over by saying that he's won a last man standing match with the Big Show, which, believe it or not, we've actually reviewed here on the channel. Because he brings out chloroform and he tries to put the Big Show down, but someone ends up interfering on that match. He has a victory over Shawn Michaels in a street fight, and he has a victory over Steve Austin in a ladder match. So this is not Shane McMahon's first rodeo. The only problem is the fact that Shane McMahon will be facing off against The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match, which is like The Undertaker's wheelhouse. But Vince McMahon shortly comes out shortly after, and you think it's The Undertaker coming out because the lights go out. All you hear is dong. And then the next thing you know, Vince McMahon's theme song plays. Almost like the Ministry of Darkness theme song, except it wasn't the Ministry of Darkness theme song. Afterwards, the whole entire crowd, Chicago, Illinois, just starts chanting, asshole, asshole, asshole. And then after like 2 minutes, they stop. And then McMahon just shits on them and says, is that all that you got? You run out of steam already? And then after that, they start chanting, CM Punk, CM Punk. In case you don't know, that's why they don't go back to Chicago. And Vince said, I'm going to tell my grandchildren, in case, so if I haven't already established, Shane McMahon is in the ring, and Shane McMahon is the son of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is standing on the ramp, and he's basically saying this to get a ruse out of his son by saying, I'm going to tell my grandchildren while Shane is in the hospital, and then of course he's pointing at his son. He says, while you're in the hospital, they can be proud of one father, their grandfather, of course. And there shortly after we get this segment with Stephanie McMahon and Dolph Ziggler, where Ziggler is confronted by Stephanie McMahon, and Stephanie tells Dolph, thank you for taking your tweet down from earlier today, which was a tweet regarding something that has to do with Shane McMahon beating The Undertaker, or for that matter, Shane McMahon having power, because what's at stake here with the Undertaker matchup that they won't shut up about is the fact that if The Undertaker wins, which he always does at WrestleMania when the lights shine the brightest, if The Undertaker wins at WrestleMania, then he gets to keep his streak. But they never bring that up. Honestly, they never once bring up The Undertaker's streak. All they're concerned about is Shane McMahon and how Shane McMahon looks. Or, for that matter, the fact that Shane McMahon is going one-on-one against The Undertaker. And they're not worried at all about The Undertaker. Ziggler took his tweet down from however long ago. And Ziggler brings up Survivor Series 2 years prior, where he almost single-handedly, well, he says it was him almost single-handedly. So he had some help, but his help probably got, stomped out, or for that matter, got kind of put to rest, almost like they must have gotten eliminated on the Survivor Series elimination match, is what I'm trying to say. But for whatever reason, I couldn't find the words. He brings up Survivor Series almost 2 years ago, wherever he was the sole survivor, and he was the one who put the authority out of power, but gets called delusional. But all of this hype right here, it just has one thing to do with the whole. And it's 35 minutes in before we get our first wrestling match. All of this hype has to do with the whole, I guess, just WrestleMania, you know? The Undertaker. I guess he was the main event at the time, which honestly he wasn't. Triple H isn't always the main event. And I know that the women wasn't the main event, which kind of sucks. But we get our first wrestling match, which is Brie Bella versus Summer Rae. And I give it 3 out of 5 stars. The only problem was that Michael Cole calls a drop kick a crossbody. They're two completely different moves, Cole. You're not watching the same match that I am, are you? Dean Ambrose comes out. He says, I love kids. They're just like regular people, but smaller. Then he says, kids don't try this at home. So he comes out. He's running his mouth toward Triple H and the whole, everything revolves around the Authority. Dolph Ziggler revolves around the Authority. They get way too much TV time. They really do. Dean Ambrose revolves around the Authority because they're getting ready for a pay-per-view that's happening Saturday called Roadblock, which most of these matches I never even fucking heard of, let alone the hype behind them. And then we get a handicap match. Dolph Ziggler is going to get punished, so he has to face off against Sheamus, Rusev, and Wade Barrett. Talk about Mania 32 Women's Championship match. As Naomi and Tamina, 2/3 of a team known as Bad, and I know that I've talked about them on this platform before. Not Naomi and Tamina, but rather the team named Bad. The third member of that team is Sasha Banks, and she's on the other side, where Sasha Banks faces off against Becky Lynch. And honestly, this match was over before it even started. Sasha Banks gets Naomi in a bank statement, and afterwards, Naomi just taps out as soon as Sasha gets it applied. The bank statement is honestly like a modified fucking crossface in one way or another. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars because it wasn't like too long. I didn't really there wasn't enough meat on the bone for me to chew on, If I'm watching a wrestling match, I want to be entertained. I just don't want it to be over as soon as it begins. But, given the story that they told and the fact that it had a lot more to do with Sasha and Becky and a lot less to do with Naomi and Tamina. And honestly, Naomi, Tamina, and Sasha Banks, back whenever they were in Bad, like I said before, they were nothing but bad. They weren't badass. They weren't... I don't know how to put it any more than what I already have. Talk about the WrestleMania 32 Women's Championship match. This is the match that I've been talking about for years, too. And for whatever reason, I kept thinking, wasn't there a match with Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks? But then, that little doubt in my mind just keeps creeping up and keeps telling me, no, sweetie, sweetheart, sweetums. You're trying to project something that doesn't exist. And for whatever reason, it kept creeping into my mind and telling me Sasha Banks doesn't exist in this match. Sweetie, replace Sasha with Ronda. Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch. Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch. That was another WrestleMania match. But this one is a triple threat match. They claim that whenever the Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch match happens, which is like years after this one, because at this point, for whatever reason, Charlotte has the Divas Championship. They still haven't called it the Women's Championship. Holy crap. So, for whatever reason, this was not your main event either, because you wouldn't get a woman's WrestleMania main event match until like years down the road. At least 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly. And for whatever reason, they end up saying that it's, quote, the first time that we've had a women's WrestleMania main event. Not whenever this one happens, but whenever the one after it happens. It's like, well, it's not the first time that you would have a woman's triple threat match at WrestleMania, though, you know? Like, I just wanted to fault them for that, and I didn't know how to say it until I just said it. R-Truth wearing around. So he's walking around with a pizza. What he says is Chicago deep dish style, and he asks Goldust if he would like a piece of it. He goes ahead, and Goldust picks it up, and then he looks at it, and then he says, I'm allergic to cheese. If you wanted to be my tag team partner, you would have known that, or whatever. He's like, and then he shuts it, and then he just leaves it there. And then Mark Henry comes by, and then he picks it up. And R-Truth is like, my bad, I'm sorry. You know, hey, Goldust, wait up. You want to know what the funny part is? Years, and I mean years earlier, like early 2000s. And this happened in 2016, but early 2000s, you know, 2003, 2002, Goldust would follow Booker T around, and he would constantly bombard him with the whole, hey, you want to be tag team? Hey, you want to be a tag team? Hey, you want to be a tag team partner? And then he would always like get all up in Booker T's face and follow him around. And then he's like, you can't be doing that. Bothering Booker T at every moment. And now R-Truth is doing the same thing to him. How it comes full circle. Oh no, it's 53 minutes in. Well, I guess I got no choice but to tell you guys the big reveal. Never mind. That's on the next page. So then we get a WWE Tag Team Championships match where Y2AJ versus The New Day. Big E and Kofi Kingston, our champions, face off against AJ Styles and Chris Jericho. Except Big E and Kofi Kingston are not your champions. Your champions this time around were Xavier Woods and Big E Langston. But they would switch out for whatever reason. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was honestly the best match of the night. We see AJ Styles do some moves that I haven't seen anybody do in a long time. He does a 450 splash off the top rope, not off the top turnbuckle, but off the top rope. He does it was a springboard 450 splash. He does the greatest looking reverse DDT that I've ever seen in my entire life, just because of how he flips it over and sticks the landing. Kalisto versus Tyler Breeze, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. 2.5 out of 5 stars, because it was really, really entertaining. Lots of high-flying action. The Social Outcasts, a group made up of Curtis Axel, Heath Slater, Bo Dallas, and Adam Rose versus Ryback. But it wasn't all that group, it was just Curtis Axel. He calls himself the Axeman, and before Ryback comes out, they're doing this number. They're taking their open palm hand, and he's going and like moving it up and down as though that he's chopping wood with an axe or something. And JBL on commentary with the line of the night, he ends up saying maybe he's practicing his lumberjacking skills. Lumberjacking skills. What the fuck? And then we come to our main event, which was Bray Wyatt versus Dean Ambrose. And honestly, these two have fought before. Like, whenever they've been in whenever Ambrose was in the Shield, and whenever Wyatt was in the Wyatt family, which by this point in time he would already be in the Wyatt family. But whenever Ambrose was in the Shield with his Shield brothers, Roman Reigns, who, according to Triple H, had a broken nose, and they were putting him back together. You would figure that you would learn, Dean Ambrose, from your brother's mistakes. But instead, you're out here challenging me? Me? Of all people, you could challenge? You're challenging me? You know, like he's got this big ego problem. Alright, so that's the end of the review. And this whole time, I've been telling you guys that I like KO. So, it's true. I like Kenny Omega. Get sha-nya-nyaed. So for those of you out there who actually thought that I liked Kevin Owens, you can all bite my ass. Because the fact was, this entire episode was designed to do nothing more than to get you, my audience, sha-nya-nyaed. And now you all feel like you've been swerved. You all feel like a bunch of idiots, I bet. You all feel like, no, he can't, he didn't go to the other side. He didn't actually think. He didn't actually think that Kevin Owens is a great, or for that matter, even a halfway decent, or even a good performer. So, I'm glad that I was able to sha-nya-nyaed everyone here. So, get sha-nya-nyaed. Thank you everyone for joining me for yet another episode of the Get sha-nya-nyaed podcast. I'm sorry. My fault. The Gut Wrench podcast. And I hope you all have a wonderful morning, a wonderful night, for that matter, a wonderful existence. It seems like to me that these weeks, like whenever I say that I'm going to upload once a week, the week just flies by, and then I'm just like, oh man, I gotta upload another episode. Not like, oh man, I gotta upload another episode, but like, oh, wait a minute, is today? No. It's time for me to record. Yeah, and then I'm just like, oh, I mean, what else can you do? I mean, they promise for content. They want the content. I'm here to deliver the content. So, for those of you who did get sha-nya-nyaed, you owe me $10. I'm joking, by the way. You don't have to pay a dime to listen to this content. However, what I would like you to do, if you can afford it, is click the link below. That's right. I'm going to plug my PayPal or Cash App or whatever. So, There should be a link in the bottom of this podcast, and it should be everywhere that you're listening. And if you can, and if you're feeling generous, and if you think that I deserve it, go ahead and donate to the cause. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And if you can't donate, it's no big deal. Hey, it's no hair off my chest. It's no... What? Now we're talking about my hairy chest? Thank you all so much for joining me, and have a wonderful evening.